See, old man here. Got the sunshine. Got the good furniture out. Got a cool drink right here. And so it's story time. Yakshamas. Yeah. 31 days. Yesterday I did do one yesterday, and I was going to sing that song, 30 days in the hole. It's a lot better than being in the hole. But it is a lockdown, nonetheless. So it's story time. More about Jackin Cedar. I like the stories that I've been personally, well, they've all been personally involved in, but it's something I really enjoyed, and working in the woods was fun. I loved the chainsaws. That's where my ears went, but just being up in the woods. There's nothing better than nature and crime, my favorite hobbies. No, I haven't done criminal stuff in a long, long, long time. Yeah. Chainsaws, nobody wore ear protection. We actually used cigarette butts sometimes. It worked. Better than nothing, I suppose. Yeah, the guys in the cedar. It was in the Northwest, that was a sought-after item. I mean, it was always good money, and people were willing to take risks to get it. And so I'm at this family reunion, and talking to this guy, and shirt-tail relative, how you been doing? Well, laid off from work, and they would at the mill, and then when they were laid off, they could go up in the woods and cut firewood to make some money on the side. But what they would do is go up there and cut cedar and stack it in the truck and then outline it with firewood, and that's how they got it home. Criminal, but I didn't blame him at all. So he said he's up in the woods, and a lot of the guys, if they were fallers, they would kind of keep an eye out for the old buckskins, is what they called them. And so they found this log, and he said it was just a hump above the dirt, like a half round that might have been 100 feet long. So they dug a hole on one end of it and found out it's this 10-foot cedar log. Back in the old days, if it wasn't perfect, they just left them. They didn't even bother with them. But there was a lot of good material left in it. And so they dig a hole down there. This thing's cool. We're going to get it out of here. And as he's telling me the story, I said, well, how did you get it out? And he goes, I'll tell you the story. They dug a trench the full length of that log, probably at least 6 feet deep, to the bottom of it, and diverted a creek into that hole, and came back a few days later, and that log was floating up, and they got it out of the way and bucked it up and hauled it out. I bet they went out for dinner on that paycheck, because I'm sure they made a lot of money on that. And some people might say, well, that's a sievin, a mother log or something, but I think it's a waste just to leave it lay there. I mean, they left plenty of punky stuff, I'm sure. Yeah, I don't feel too bad about that. I'll tell you at the end of the story what the real crime is about logging and that stuff in our history. So yeah, this other guys I know, they're doing the same thing up in Enumclaw area, and they're working close to town, so they had to quiet the chainsaws down. So they took the muffler off and welded a plate to a 10-foot length of flex pipe and ran that into the ground, and he said it worked really good. It didn't make any noise at all. They had spotters with walkie-talkies. It was serious business. They, I suppose they could be jailed for it. But at the time, they figured it was worth the risk. And the other one was Randy, that friend of mine, and Ron. Both of them have moved on, so rest in peace, guys. But yeah, they found this cedar up in the woods somewhere. I don't even know how they found it. Here's the road and a big steep hill, and the logs are way up there. So they basically hiked up there and bivouacked and stayed during the week, and then they'd come home on the weekend and shower up at my place and go to town. So they're going through it, and I went up there and helped them one day, and I was working at the big home at the time. And I go, well, how are you going to get this down here, down the hill? And he goes, well, we could just roll it or do whatever. And I said, well, I got a 100-foot cable. And so they wrapped that around a tree and ran the cable down to another tree, and they would take big staples. You okay, lady? I know. And nail that to the cable and slide it down and slide them all down and take that cable and move it down, and did that all the way down the hill. I think they did okay as far as getting money and stuff. But that's just the way they did it. And there was about 4 or 5 guys in the neighborhood that were all basically doing the same thing in different areas. And they said, we need a truck to haul this stuff, a good truck. So there was this old guy in town, Greasy Sid. He was a mentor of mine that I learned a lot from, and he was so old that he was a blacksmith turned mechanic. And he could do it. This is no lie. I've seen him eat lunch and pick his teeth with baling wire, and if it didn't fit quite right, he'd take a wrench and tap the wire to make it thinner. Yeah, get it figured out. He was a hardcore old man. So they're at Sid's shop, we need a truck, and he goes, I'll sell you that GMC truck. It was, I think, a 1939 or 40 GMC dump truck with a Packard straight 8 engine. If you know anything about old cars, that's quite a combination. And Sid, he did it. It was, I don't know how, but hey. And but he did it. And I told Randy, we're looking at it, and the guys that bought it really weren't into cars at all. And Randy says, give me he had to write down what kind of engine it was and size it was, because if they ever needed parts, and you know, there's a lot of different Packard engines. So hang on a second here. Sound of Freedom. So they got that truck, and they did good. Hang on a second here. I'm actually using a different phone this time to tape it. I hope it's good. In the past I've tried it. The picture wasn't quite as clear, so we'll see what happens. My other phone that I usually use says its memory is full, and I erased everything. Still didn't work. I don't know nothing about that stuff. I'm learning about that stuff. So, yeah, the guys and the Cedar was a big deal. I knew a couple guys that went to prison over it. Not prison, they got jail time out of it. And they were being greedy. This one guy bid on a property and got all these trees fell, and I called it skirting the fence. They drug logs on the other side of the boundary to their property, and we're taking that as well. Jeez. A bit like SeaTac. Give them hell, guys. So yeah, everybody was tempted with the Cedar, and it's just the way it was. Working in the mill and stuff, it's, you know, good money, but it when you're laid off, and it's okay to work around the situation. Yeah, that guy that was hauling the logs onto his property, he said the guy that was running the helicopter pick it up. He said it was like clockwork. They'd grab a hold of it, swing it over, drop it off the landing, grab another one, drop it right off. And he said the helicopter pilot goes, "Hey, is this show legal?" And Ken goes, "Yeah, why? What's the problem?" He goes, "Because we got the feds coming up the hill, and they're coming up fast." And they came up there, and little did these guys know they had stamped those logs that were on the other side of the fence. And so they went to jail for grand larceny, I suppose. Yeah, you don't, I mean, that's being greedy. They just took more than they should have, and he paid the price. But, you know, stealing cedar and stuff, it's a crime and everything, but the real crime that I'll talk about is the land barons who owned all of the timber company, Weyerhaeuser, Plum Creek, all these other big companies, made a point that they just said, we're not going to make lumber anymore. We're going to sell raw logs to China and Japan. And that simple act of their greed ruined the Northwest. People that had worked in the mills their whole lives, generations of people are now unemployed. There's no work. They had protests. Don't export our jobs. They tried hard, but the powers that be just said no. You know, if they don't want to deal with the mills and the unions and all that stuff, screw it. They can sell raw logs, and they did it. And it ruined everything. It ruined families. It ruined everything. I mean, you got guys and girls that have been used to working and a steady income and doing a certain kind of work for years, and all of a sudden to just shut that off was really sad. It just turned to alcoholism, depression. I mean, that simple fact just changed everything. There was actually a picture, and I tried to find it, but I couldn't. Greenpeace, pretty extreme group, but they went down to Tacoma to the tide flats, and on a big ship full of logs, they posted a banner that might have been 100 feet long by 30 feet tall, I don't know. Don't export our jobs. And there was a big protest and everything, but the rich people back then, it's different than now. They didn't care. It's tough. We're going to do it, and that's what they did. So yeah, that cousin, it just was a sad ending. They, you know, the state says, well, we'll train you how to be, who knows, some other job. But it's just like, if they would have just continued to make lumber, we'd still have all the trees we want. They did the cut and run, and there was scandals where it just turned out bad. I feel, you know, hardly anybody works in the woods anymore just because it's so complicated. Weyerhaeuser, which was the land baron forever, shut down, sold out everything. The mill up in Enumclaw that was there for 100 years, I don't know how long, it's gone. They just not only closed it, they just took it apart and it's gone. There's nothing there anymore. Yeah, really screwed things up. I just saw within the last year the Weyerhaeuser sold their office in Federal Way, and it was this great big place. They actually were going to build a skyscraper, but they didn't do it. Hey, you know, if she didn't like me, I've said it before, I'd be drawing blood right now. Hey. Quit it. So with that, I'll be back. I want to talk some stories about old school Aberdeen. When I was a kid, I spent a lot of time down at Kurt Cobain's place. I never liked Nirvana too much. A couple of their songs were okay, but I did like the fact that I know where Kurt Cobain probably bought his first pack of cigarettes. Kind of a rough part of town in Aberdeen, down by the water, and there was this smoke shop that was there when I was a kid, and kind of a little porno shop, cigarette shop or something. And they didn't care. And the last time I drove through there, I don't know how many years ago that was, that smoke shop was still there, and I bet it was the same deal. They didn't care who came up to the counter. If you had the money, they'd sell it to you. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Port towns always seem to have a surplus of men, and a lot of stories go with that, that's for sure. Yeah, I could go on and on. But hey, the sun is out. I hope everybody liked the one about the box. I still got the big barn to go through. So we'll be back. Everybody stay safe and keep praying. The last I heard, there's 160 cases in Skagit County, and it really hasn't jumped up like they thought it would, and it still could happen. Man, what a mess. But the old man will be back. We'll tell more stories, and we'll go from there. Yeah, it's nice to sit in the sun. Here comes another plane. Happy trails, my friends. Thanks for stopping by. See ya.